Hi, welcome to You Didn't Get the Memo Show. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray. And as always, we got a great show for you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. I want to remind all of you that You Didn't Get the Memo is about providing you, the viewer, with relevant, factual, mainstream information to help you be informed and to make informed decisions. My guest today is Ms. Tandaway Cato, who is a financial advisor at Matthews Financial and Insurance Solutions. And let me just tell you, she's going to drop some nuggets and some knowledge on us. And I'm going to ask that you guys just hang in here with us for the next 55 minutes or so, okay? Now, I want to let you guys know that today's show is actually being brought to you by one of our sponsors, Booker T. Washington Community Service Center. And if you should have questions, you can place them in the comment section. We'll do our very best to get to you. Now, let me tell you a little bit about my guest today. Ms. Tandaway Cato, who is a financial advisor, as I said, at Matthews Financial and Insurance Solutions. But her previous work at Merrill Lynch Wealth Management actually laid the foundation for her work as an advisor at Matthew Financial and Insurance Solution. She is just an awesome woman, very, very knowledgeable, and I'm sure she's going to drop some knowledge on you guys. So I want to welcome Miss Tandaway. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for being on the show.
Yes, thank you. No, this is an amazing platform. I've never used it before, so I'm
Okay.
excited to be here and talk to folks today.
Yeah, well, that is awesome. I am so happy that you're on. And as always, this show is about providing our viewers with relevant, factual, mainstream information to help them be informed and to make informed decisions. And that's literally what it comes down to. Our show is viewed all over the world. And I say to all of my viewers, if you don't mind, if you're here, you be sure just drop us a note in the comment section and let us know where you are tuning in from, what city, what state, but holla at us for sure. So I'm going to start, first of all, Tenderly, as I always do with my guests, is I would like to ask you to tell the viewers a little bit about your backstory. Very interesting, and I'm certain that they're probably picking up on that accent there. So let's talk a little bit about your backstory. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got into the financial industry.
Sure. So it all started. I always had a knack for just learning about business in general. And when I went to college, I studied international business. I had my first finance internship, and I actually didn't like it. It was very boring. I was interning and working with a lot of analysts. And so afterwards, I didn't know if I still wanted to be part of that industry. So upon graduating, I actually did somewhat of a gap year and went and did a lot of traveling, came back and ended up in doing working for a company that did equipment financing and working capital. And then from there, I got into banking. From banking, I soon decided, okay, what's next for me? And so within the next few months, I went from being a teller there to being on the wealth management side and being able to work with individuals and businesses, which was great. I absolutely loved it. I got fully licensed there, I got my start there. And after that, especially during the pandemic, was when I realized I wanted to work essentially on a smaller level to be able to work with just the folks who just need essential financial planning, just the basics of things. Because sometimes, especially working for a larger company, you're working with very high net worth individuals, but the folks who just need the basic planning were very much getting overlooked. So I ended up now currently at Matthews Financial and Insurance Solutions, and that's the best decision that I've made, especially being in the pandemic. And that's currently where I'm at right now.
Yeah, well, I think that that's awesome, and I love the fact I've had a couple of different people that talk about various aspects of the financial planning or on the financial planning spectrum. But one of the things I love hearing you say is simply the fact that number one, they're just basic individuals out there. They don't even know where to start. So it's one thing when you got a lot of money, but it's another thing when you have money and you saying, look, I'm pinching pennies and I don't know if I can afford a financial planner. And that's where you would come in and what it is that you do. And I'm really happy to hear you say that. And also, one of the things that I think our viewers need to know about you is that you, your work has propelled you. You are dedicated. You are very, very interested in your clients. And I love that because that's what has kept people, hanging in there with you and coming back. And a lot of times that's what people need. They need someone that's going to kind of handhold them through the process and make them feel really, really good about what it is that they're doing. And you and I both know we can't say enough about the need to plan and to plan for the future. And that's really, really important. So thank you so much for sharing that. But you know what? People are probably asking, and hello to all of you. Thank you so much, Arkansas, Texas, for being in the house. I'm really happy that you guys are here. Georgia, thank you for tuning in. Um, the question that I have, and probably other people are saying, when you say financial advisor, what is that? So let's just really level set and tell people what San Antonio in the house. Uh, Let people know what a financial advisor is. Talk about that, please.
Absolutely. So, the way I always like to describe it is someone who can help you create a roadmap to some of your goals, especially your financial goals. So, that may be helping you to meet your retirement goals. It may be you want to purchase a house, say for education, whatever it is. I definitely saw that there was a lack in the industry where there's people who are selling specific products or selling investments, but there wasn't enough on the planning side. So I think definitely when it's more comprehensive and you get a clear understanding of where that person is, I think it makes it a much smoother process down the line. That's why I never recommend people unless they ask for a certain product or service specifically. I always want to make sure I do the due diligence to make sure I understand their situation very well before I start to recommend what kind of products or services that they may need.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, which leads into the next question. What areas, or what are some areas that people tend to overlook when it comes to making financial decisions? And I know that's probably like, there's a lot of things, but let's just break it down because for a lot of our younger adults who are tuned in, this is extremely critical that you get on the bandwagon now. It's another thing when you start much, much later in life and trying to save and plan, it makes all the difference in the world. So I really hope that you're tuned in. But back to the original question, as it relates to what are the areas that people tend to overlook when making financial decisions.
Sure. So the most common thing that I see is just to bring it back to just on a foundational level is being able to understand your budget. I think when you look at all of these Fortune 500 companies, if they're able to look at their income or how much revenue they're doing and their expenses, and yet you're like, okay, I don't need a budget, I'm good, it doesn't necessarily make as much sense. You need to know how much is coming in and how much is going out. So before you start to plan on any investments in, purchasing a home or paying for life insurance, whatever it is, you need to understand how much money you have left over to do that. And then just because you also reference people who are younger, one thing that I commonly see is that they're in this realm of, okay, I have to do certain things in the now. So they're not necessarily thinking about what that's going to look like 20 or 30 years down the line. And it is very challenging sometimes to get them to see that, to say, okay, you're putting away money that's going to be invested. We don't want to touch that because in 20 or 30 years, that's going to look a lot larger than what you initially put in. But it's that time of compounding interest that you kind of have to wait it out. So I would definitely say to the folks in here who are younger is to start now. And even if you have a little bit, whether you can do, $20 a week or $100 a week, as long as you're doing something to get started, I think that's where people kind of get a little bit intimidated. They think, okay, I need $1,000 to get started. No, you only need $20 to start making sure that you'll have something saved for later.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm happy to hear you say that because I think, in many cases, we really and truly set our own selves up for failure. And what I mean by that is thinking that I need to be able to save $500 a paycheck or 1,000. Yeah, that's great if you can. But what I hear you're saying is we need to start somewhere. And when we start, even if it's amazing. Um, I grew up with what we call the Christmas Club savings book, right? And so every January, what you would do is for every month, if you could put in every week, you would put in whether it was $5 or $10. But you just think about it, if you're doing $20 a month times 12 months, look at what you have. And then you do that by 5 years and then 10 years. It really starts to add up. And that's the message that we want to get across to people is that you got to start somewhere because just saying throwing your hands up, it just really doesn't make any sense. So I'm really happy to hear you say that. And yeah, it's a challenge because we're certain generations now. I'm of the older OG generation, so uh, we believe in saving for that rainy day, as opposed to I need to get it now, I need to have it right now. And the unfortunate thing is we never ever know when something will come up and it's going to happen. And so that's literally what we're talking about. But let me just ask you this question, Tandaway. In your opinion, why do people try and do their own financial planning without the help of a financial advisor? And I'm looking for, is it because they think it costs too much or they don't know where to start or how to evaluate? So can you expound on that, please?
Absolutely. I think it comes into sometimes you don't know what you don't know. And when I look at it like this, I mean, I personally, if something happens to my car, I'm not going to try and fix it. I'm not good with cars. I'm going to pay the money to make sure that it's fixed properly. And it's the same way I view financial advising. If money is something, again, that you're using every day, is going in and out of your account, why not take the time to have someone, a professional, look over it to make sure that it's going in the right places, and especially so that you're able to start hitting your goals. So I think sometimes I do hear people say, okay, maybe I don't want to pay for the services, or I don't want to put as much money in investments and make that commitment. But I would say you can't have a certain level of, especially when you're looking towards, let's say, retirement, you can't reach certain goals without a certain level of commitment. And that definitely starts with having somebody who's a professional to take a second look and make sure that you're doing all the right things that you need to do.
And that is, I just think it's so critical. I know that a lot of times people, they hear stories
Mhm.
about, oh, financial planners and they cost this much, rather than doing your own homework. Rather than really seeking to understand and to know, it never hurts to ask a question. And I love your analogy about a car. It breaks down, and yeah, what do I know about cars, right? And so sometimes that's that kind of rainy day piece that you may need. But at the same time, it's just putting aside and recognizing the impact that having a savings could have on you. So, Tandaway, I'm going to ask you this question and we're going to take a quick break. We always got to pay the bills. And I'm going to ask, how would you define what financial health is and what goes into a person's financial health? Like, how is it determined? What areas do you look at? So, you guys don't go away. My guest, Ms. Tandaway Cato, This sister is smart. She is just one of those individuals that you want to be able to connect with. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Let's get back to talking smack with the side of mac and cheese. Before we can safely come together, we need the facts on COVID-19 vaccines. To get the facts, visit getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Home fire drills give your family a plan of action. Show everyone 2 ways out of the house, pick a safe meeting spot, and get there in under 2 minutes. Then practice so everyone knows exactly what to do. Go to ready.gov/fire drill and learn how to prepare your family.
If doctors, nurses, and grocery store clerks can wear a mask for 10 or 12-hour shifts, you can wear a mask for an hour or less when you go to the store. Do your part. Mask up, America.
All right, if you guys are just tuning in, my guest today is Miss Tandaway Cato, who is a financial advisor. And we're just really trying to get people look, it's towards the end of the year. We are actually into, you might as well say, basically almost September. So it's time. There's no better time than now for you guys, all of us, to really get in tune to where we are and look at our financial health. And that's one of the questions that I posed to my guest, Miss Tandaway, before we went to break, is let's talk about financial health. And the question that I posed to you was, how would you define what financial health is and what goes into how a person's financial health is determined? What areas do you look at?
Absolutely. So I always like to, again, bring it to just a foundational level. And I really am big on just simplifying things because sometimes it can be a little bit more complex than it has to. So one of the books that I always typically refer back to is The Richest Man in Babylon. The reason I like this book is, number one, it's very short. So anytime someone tells me an excuse they can't read it, it's less than 100 pages. I want to say it's maybe even 50 pages. And the basics are there's 8 principles. It talks about, okay, how do I start saving? How do I then from there go into investing? Okay, now I've invested. How do I purchase more assets? Okay, I've purchased more assets. How do I protect those assets? And so, again, just having the basics and understanding that initially before you start getting to those more complex things is very important. Other things that I would definitely say as far as financial fitness would be making sure that you're managing debt. I think that's a huge a killer, especially, and I don't think all debt is bad debt, but especially when it comes to consumer debt, even student loan debt, that can sometimes stop us from reaching specific goals and being able to accumulate more assets. So I think that's a huge thing. And then the second thing is really focusing on the retirement planning piece and making sure we're not just putting everything in the savings account. Now that we've already done that, and I like to say, 3 to 6 months of expenses in that savings just for liquidity. But after that, you want to look at some other investment strategies to make sure down the line your money is actually working for you.
Well, that totally makes an awful lot of sense. And I, when you talk about, first of all, let's just go back up to when we talk about debt and in evaluating. I remember reading somewhere where if you make $60,000 a year and you are in debt at $65,000, what's wrong with that picture, right? And a lot of times people don't stop to really think about what does that really mean? That living to or living above and beyond your means, to me, I just see it as you just open up Pandora's box and it just seems to just morph into something that's bigger and bigger and bigger. So let's just say that if you are talking to someone as their financial advisor, and the first thing that you look at is what their debt ratio is to what their net income is. Uh, you got this much debt and you got this much outgo. How do you go about, uh, getting that person to conceive of what you are saying and understanding that they really need to make some changes as it relates to just where they are in debt, because they're in debt if they're spending more than they're making. And I just kind of throw that out there, but what are your thoughts about that, just off the top of your head?
Yeah, so I mean, honestly, I can probably tell if someone's in debt from the initial conversation. But what I'll typically ask is, do you know what your expenses are, your monthly expenses are? Most people will say, yeah, I know it's maybe $3,000 a month. I say, okay, well, why don't you do this budget? And then they do the budget. We come to find out that it's 4,000 a month, but you're only making, let's say 2,500. So there's this deficit already where you're spending too much, and we need to see either one of two things. Number one, we need to either lower your expenses, or we need to increase your income, or we can do both. But typically, the easiest things to do in most cases is to be able to lower your expenses. And the thing is, people kind of get uncomfortable when I say that, because they don't necessarily want to give up certain lifestyle changes, because that's been a part of what they've been doing. How could that be wrong? But I think when you start to take a step back and really evaluate what your long term goals are, it makes complete sense to start tackling that debt early on.
Absolutely. I love it. And you guys just heard it. This is why she's a financial advisor. She can just look at and just tell where you are. And this is really, really important. I just really want people to get this, because even if you are an older adult and you are tuned into the show, it's never too late for you to really sit down and just look at and make a budget. And there's so many tools out there. I know you probably have different tools that people can go to pull up and do a budget sheet. I know for me, I use the AARP budget sheet. So, and it clearly tells me where I'm at, what my algo is, what my income is, those kinds of things. So I know that there are probably various tools out there that people can use that would help them with even doing a budget. Because when you talk budget, people are like, I know how much money I'm spending, but no, you really and truly don't. And that's your aha moment, right? That's when you realize, you know what? My bills every month is $4,000, and I'm only making 2,500. So
Right.
where's that other $1,500 gonna come from?
A credit card. Typically, it's being put on the credit card. So yeah, when I know when there's kind of this imbalance, and again, like you said, so typically we'll do the budget sheet. It'll tell you right there. We'll go through each category, and then there'll be a graph on the next tab, and
Hmm.
it's like, okay, now you're over $1,500. Where does that extra $1,500 come from every month? Because all these things are paid, and you've made an obligation to make payments to all these different things, but you
Hmm.
haven't made a payment to yourself.
Right.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of how I will start calculating.
Critical. Paying yourself first. Isn't it interesting? At least I find it interesting how many people will put paying themselves last, which basically means that they they don't pay themselves, but yet they will try to pay everything else. And one thought came to mind when you were saying that they put that extra $1,500 on a credit card. That credit card has got to be paid too. So that's another bill,
Yeah.
right? So I see this as a vicious cycle. People are in this vicious cycle, and it's not enough to just make the minimum payment on a credit card payment. I'm certain that you would counsel and talk to them about that as well. So The thing is, what do you do? What do you do? And that's why I have you on the show so that we can talk about being able to help people to get there. So, under financial health, let's just talk about retirement savings for a moment. Um, what are your thoughts as it relates to you're working with a client and I'm just going to pull, let's just say it's somebody that's 40, 45, and talking with them about retirement savings because that's part of their financial health. What type of advice or suggestions would you give to an individual who is wanting to retire and they've just come in and they say, well, I think I need some financial planning? How does that happen? Where does, where do you go from there?
Absolutely. And I would say I definitely meet with people on a one on one basis because, even just from an age standpoint, looking towards retirement, there may be other expenses that they may have compared to somebody else. So they may have to pay a mortgage, or they might want to be purchasing a home. But I would consider things like long term care planning. Do they have any, what does their retirement accounts look like? How much have they contributed? Does their employer contribute to their plans? And just making sure that they're in a good place for when they choose to retire. Another thing I would also look at is what other contributions will come upon them retiring. Let's say they have some pension benefits, or also in calculating what their social security payments could look like down the line. So these are some things that I try to get people, especially if someone's 45, to start thinking about. But again, it's going to be different depending on the situation and what their goals are in the short term and also in the long term.
Mm-hmm. All right. Financial health and talking about emergency funds, those things that you just gave an example of, a car breaking down, or it could be a hospital bill, or it could be, there are a myriad of things. Let's just say if you don't have a home warranty and your water heater burst. So, when we're talking about financial health, is looking at emergency funds a part of what you do as well?
Absolutely. And I think that goes into the protection piece of financial planning. So some people will just kind of glorify, okay, you need to invest your money and do all these different things as you start to accumulate assets. But what do you do after you've done that, and how do you protect them? And two things that I always like to refer back to is to make sure that you have the proper insurance planning, and to make sure you also have the proper estate planning. I'll describe insurance as making sure you have some sort of income, or the people who depend on you have some source of income if you're no longer there. And then on the other side of that, estate planning is kind of the instructions. So let's say, for an example, you have a life insurance policy, it goes to a beneficiary. Are there specific things that you want to happen with that money? Do you think that that person would just blow the money, go on vacation, maybe spend it on something that you wouldn't want them to spend it on? The estate planning piece really helps you to say, hey, I want you to maybe use the money when you are 30 years old, and it has to be spent on purchasing a home, or it has to be spent on education. So I think, again, making sure you have that protection piece is probably the most important after you've started to grow your assets.
Yeah, and that comes down to people having a living will and trust, and in that trust, whether it's revocable or irrevocable trust. But the thing is, and that's a great point, because a lot of times people will leave money to their loved ones, and you're exactly right. They're going to take a vacation, they're going to buy a shiny new car, and not think about the repercussions of what they have just done, because you know what, I got all this money, and we know it really and truly doesn't grow on trees. That truly, people who believe the money grows on trees, that you're fooling yourself. But it's good to hear you say that, and you threw in that aspect about life insurance, and I can't say enough about that. it's more and more expensive to bury someone. And so, without having life insurance, what do? You're either going to go to a credit card or you're going to go into your savings, or in this case, one of my guests was said you're going to have a GoFundMe account asking people to help you to bury your loved one. So, this is why it's so critical that we talk about these types of things to educate and inform people and get people excited about, hey, I'm doing this for me and for my family. So I'm really happy to hear you say that. So, uh, Kendaway, what are some tips that you maybe can share with us to help an individual stay on top of keeping their finances in tip top shape?
Absolutely. I think one major thing, again, is being able to refer back to your budget and then also to readjust it. And there's tons of, whether you're using Excel or you're just writing it down or you're using a lot of these new budgeting apps that are coming out, making sure that you're tracking what you're spending, how much is coming in, how much is going out. And then on another level is just to find a financial professional to work with to basically help you get in the right position to meet some of your financial goals. So I know, there's folks who want to do it themselves, and that's great. But there's also a lot of information out there. And so when you're working with a financial advisor, they're basically going to help you navigate and answer a lot of the questions that you may have as well.
Yeah, and that's really, really good to know and to hear. So we're going to take another quick break, and when we come back, I want to get into another aspect of what we're talking about, and it has to do with business planning because there are people out there who own businesses or who are looking to start a business, and I think a lot of the information that you will be able to share with them will also be able to impart to them and get them moving on the right track as well. So you guys don't go anywhere. Thank you so much for hanging in. All right. Appreciate it.
Before we celebrate the freedom most Americans have, we must fight for the freedom all Americans deserve. Because all lives can't matter until Black lives matter.
Show some respect. Show you give a damn. Show the world how it's done. Show them that when your community needed you the most, you showed up. Mask up, America.
All right, we're back, and I just want to thank all of you for hanging in here with me and my guest, Ms. Tandue Cato, a financial advisor. And we're just really trying to level set and help people to really come into their own about the need to have a financial advisor and to do proper planning. So, again, I want to remind you if you have questions for my guests, you can place it in the comment section and we'll do our very best to get them. I also do want to just share with you that there are some comments in some of the things that we've been talking about out of San Antonio. People need to do inventory of their finances, and also, you need to know what is coming in and what is going out. And so, and I love it. We had another viewer, and she complimented you. So, kudos, because I'm happy to have you on the show. That you're very knowledgeable in the area of finance. And so we've got, you guys keep your comments coming. I love that, and I really, really appreciate it. So before we went to break, one of the things that I asked of Tandaway was I want to get into the business planning aspect of it. And I will start by asking, what are some things that your company can help business owners with around business planning? Let's start with, first of all, just talking about a buy sell agreement. What is that? So people kind of have an understanding.
Sure. So a buy sell agreement, let's say for an example, you have three individuals who are business owners and one of the business owners passes away. Basically, what that will do is provide liquidity to the family of that owner because let's say they have a spouse, they're not going to just enter into the business because maybe they weren't a part of that business before. And the remaining two owners are then going to have main control of the business. Other types of insurance for businesses are also key person insurance, which is if you have somebody who is a top executive and they're very instrumental to how the business functions. What you have to ask the question, okay, what would happen if that person wasn't there? Basically, the business would fail to run. So what that does is again provides money to the business that goes back directly into the company until they're able to find someone to either take over the business or if they have to buy them a little bit more time if they have to then close the business. So when it comes to business planning more specifically, a lot of times people are hustling, they're grinding, they're not necessarily thinking about how the business would operate if they were not there. So I always challenge people to start thinking about that and making sure, especially if you have other business partners, how that business would essentially run if you were not there as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that's really good to know because we see and we hear about it all the time. Two or three people have gone into business together, but the main partner, something happens, they have a heart attack, they die, they come, stroke, whatever. How does that business continue on? And especially if you have employees, who's going to take over? How does that work? And a lot of times, and correct me if I'm wrong, a lot of times business people have a business and their family may not know enough about the business to try to step in and run it. And that's why you want to have that key man or that key person insurance with it outlined who is supposed to step up and who's supposed to take over. Would that be a correct assessment?
Absolutely, and it also comes into making sure that you have the proper um, the legal stuff also figured out on that side as well because when one person either whether it's they actually pass away or they have a disability to where they're not able to work in the same capacity,
Hmm.
people start to argue. Things start getting messy. And when things are written down saying that we're either going to do it this way or that way,
Hmm.
it tends to mediate the situation so that you don't have a lot of those other things that kind of get in the way of the business.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And along the aspect of talking about business planning, as it relates to employee benefits, a lot of times, employers provide a lot of different benefits, but the employee doesn't take advantage of that. So, can you speak to that for a moment, please?
Absolutely. So typically, especially when you first get into a job, there should be somebody who is able to explain your full employee benefits to you. That's not always the case, but in most cases, there is a person to refer back to. You just also have to make an appointment with them. And then from there, you should have access. Some companies are a little bit older and may not have this, but typically you have an online portal where you're able to access all your benefits. So after having a meeting with someone, I usually tell them, okay, you need to log on, find out what all your benefits are. That way, if you have any questions and I can't answer them, then you can also refer back to the person who is directly in charge of understanding your employer benefits, and we can start to calculate, okay, how much should you be putting towards your 401k plan? How much disability insurance do you have through your job? Is that enough coverage? If you have life insurance to your job, even though that's great to have, do you also want to have a separate policy? Because if it's connected to your job and you're no longer there, how is that going to affect if something were to happen to you and the implications to your family? So I always tell people again to make sure that they have a clear understanding of what their employee benefits are, just so there's no confusion if anything were to happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for bringing up that piece about if you work for an employer and you've got life insurance, and you could even have if people have invested in stocks and what have you. It's a little different because with life insurance is it may not be portable, or if it is portable, meaning you can take it with you, the thing becomes it's going to be a lot more expensive, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes I would say that if you have a client who has certain health issues, the nice thing about being in a group insurance, the premiums are still much lower. But when you step out of the group, those premiums increase, exponentially. They are so much more expensive. But the problem could be you're not going to be able to get insurance if you've got, diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease, and those kinds of things as well. So,
Yeah, and I would also add, because I do see that a little bit more where people are more worried about the health insurance piece.
mhm,
So knowing that they're not going to be able to afford it, because if you're under a group plan, even if your employer pays for partial of it, it's still going to be significantly lower than when you have to pay for an individual health plan. And
mhm,
let's say, for an example, you've been under their plan for a huge amount of years and now you're stepping into retirement and now you have to pay for it yourself. You have to account for that in your when you start to do your retirement planning, because that can be a huge expense. And then on the other side, you also mentioned life insurance for people who have specific health issues.
mhm,
I will say it is a little bit more trouble if you do have it and you want to qualify for life insurance. It is not impossible. There are still life insurance companies that do it, no problems. The premiums just might be higher. And
mhm.
if you do not qualify for life insurance at all, or you get declined, I would say looking at least getting a final expense policy, just to make sure that your burial and your funeral are taken care of.
Absolutely. Great tips, and something for everybody that's tuned in and watching to just really pay attention to, especially if you're still working. Those are things that you want to find out. And throughout the show, you see I've been putting up Tendaway's information. If you're looking to contact her, you will be able to do that. But it is really important. It's all about, as I say, be informed in order to make informed decisions as well. Look, guys, we're going to take another really quick break. And when we come back, Tendue, I'm going to ask you about what would a client get if they hired you as their financial advisor. So, guys, don't go anywhere. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll be right back.
Thank you for watching the You Didn't Get the Memo show with your inspirational host, Gloria Bailey Ray. It's your contributions that make this happen. To become a sponsor, send an email to youdidn'tgetthememo@gmail. That's the letter U, didn't get the memo. If you're not in a space to be a sponsor, but you like what you hear, we simply ask that you support what you like by making a contribution to the show. There are 3 ways to make an online donation. Visit paypal.me/Gloria Bailey Ray or Cash App or Venmo, Gloria Bailey Ray. Give what you can. Your support is appreciated.
All right, if you guys are just tuning in, you have missed so much, but you can go back and watch the show because it stays up on YouTube and on Facebook. But my guest is financial advisor Miss Tandaway Cato, and she is just awesome. I mean, giving us some great nuggets and things that we need as we move forward. Before we went to a quick break, one of the questions that I asked her was, what would a client get if they hired her as their financial advisor? So I'm going to let you take it away, Tanda.
Absolutely. I would definitely say the customer service piece and being able to, I want to make you feel like you're my only client and give you the accessibility, be able to walk you through things, to give you the education. I think that's definitely lacking in certain ways. I definitely will make sure that we do reviews, and if there's any life changes that we adjust our plan to make sure that we're meeting those goals. So I think again, it's just making sure that you're caring and making sure that person is able to meet what they said they were going to do. So just holding people accountable and also making sure that I am accessible. So I'm not spending, too much time not answering your emails or your calls. I make sure that I get back to you and respond in a timely manner.
Yeah, that's important. So many people are caught up in, I call it email hell. You send an email and you don't get a response for a week or 2 or 3 weeks. And it's just, I can just imagine, just having been in that situation, how frustrating that can be. So, the next question that I want to pose to you is, what do you want people who are watching the show today, what do you want them to take away from today's interview?
Absolutely. I want people to start investigating to make sure that they understand what their current situation is, to start looking at your employer benefits, to start investing or, start your savings account, but to make sure again that it's not always about doing something big, it's about starting where you can. So again, I hope that message was clear that, I just want people to make sure if it's a little bit, that's okay. You can definitely start building up as time goes on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And Brooke, I'm going to put in the chat there where people can contact you. This is your information. Make sure that's correct. It's THANDIWEC at mfis.biz, and her contact number. And Tandaway, because we're all over the world, that 510-943-2124 number, people will still be able to reach you, correct?
Correct.
Okay, all right then. So again, I want to thank my guest, Ms. Tandaway Cato, for being on the show today. I think that the information that she has shared with you, it is informational, it's educational, and it also should be inspirational to each of you, because you have an opportunity now to say, hey, I'm on this spectrum or I'm not on this spectrum and I need to get help. And there is nothing wrong. That I met Tandaway, and I just want to say this. Um, the one thing that she has a way of doing is just putting you at ease, and it is not about beating you up about where you are, what you've not done. It is literally about uplifting you and helping you to get to the next level where you want to go. And so I think that that is really, really important. And so for those of you who are looking and you know that you need help, and I know that you guys know that you know this, I want you, and I want to encourage you to reach out to Tandaway and to embrace what it is that she can bring to the table as your financial advisor. Tandaway, I don't want you to go anywhere. But you hang on, and I'm going to say to all of you, first of all, I want to thank you guys so much for tuning into the show. As always, this is our goal, is to provide you, the viewer, with information that's going to be informational, educational, as well as inspirational in many ways. I want to thank my guest, Ms. Tandaway Cato, financial advisor, for being on the show. A general reminder to all of you is to support our efforts by inquiring about our sponsorship packages or opportunities. And if you would like to just be a supporter, you know, give what you can. Just know that it's your support that helps us bring this type of information to you. I want you to be sure and follow me on all my social media platforms, and to mark your calendar for every Tuesday at 5 p.m. for always another great show on You Didn't Get the Memo. I want to remind you guys this: if you're in need of some midweek inspiration, be sure and tune into my podcast, Real Talk with Lady G, every Thursday at 6 p.m. on Spreaker. That's Spreaker, Spreaker.com, at 6 o'clock, 30 minutes. But get your inspiration on. I want to give a quick shout out to all my viewers, to my donors, to my sponsors, and I want to thank all of you for your support. As I always say, if you didn't take anything away from today's show, then it's really you who didn't get the memo. Until this time next week, I want you to have a great week. I want you to give thanks to everything, all of your many blessings that you've got. I want you to stay safe, mask up, whatever you do, and get vaccinated. Hey, it's something that we've got to do. Also, remember to pay it forward. No matter what you do, you must always remember this, that the quality of your life is determined by the decisions that you make. Until this time next week, be well. God bless. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray. Peace out.